Okay. Is this the right one? Ah, yes. Hello.
Good morning.
Hi.
Hi. Maybe I'll change my background. I feel like this morning.
I'm just going to write a couple more notes.
Okay.
System. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Okay.
How are you doing?
I don't know. I feel pretty feisty and frustrated this morning. So.
Oh, really? Oh,
Hopefully, I
that's...
don't go into too much of a rant mode.
No, please do. I mean, ranting is good. What do you do when you realize it's you? That's the problem. Okay. No, I just wanted to, I was just looking at what we spoke about last week. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm personally a fan of a good rant.
A good rant. Yeah, I can get a good rant in sometimes.
Well, that's when you kind of get, I don't know, I feel like that's when the juice comes out, right?
Mm-hmm.
The passion.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna go out now. And what's going on here? Now it's asking me to sign.
Do you want me to share something on Facebook?
Actually, yeah, as soon as I go live, if you can share wherever you want.
Just share my home.
Why is my Zoom doing this? Live on Facebook. That's really annoying. It's asking me to sign into my Zoom and it should be signed in automatically. Okay, this is probably because I restarted. Dash Lane. Zoom. Yeah, because it's 10 p.m. here and I've literally had the laptop on for the whole day. Okay. Password.
I never turn my computer off.
I rarely do as well, but I find that sometimes it can get funny if you've been doing that for a while. Please, so oh, for God's sake. One second. Show. Okay. Let me try again. Live on Facebook. Here we go. Save. Yes, thank you. Okay, so yes, it says it is live. So if you want to share the live stream, please be my guest.
Where do I do that? Do I have to find you?
You have to find me, yes. Okay. It might not be live just yet. That's where we're going to go beyond the polarity. Oh, I see you. Polarity of attachment with polar. Okay.
Okay. I don't see it yet.
Yeah, it should be. It might be just slightly delayed, but it should be appearing.
On your page, yeah.
Now, now
There we go. Okay.
you
All right,
see
here we
us?
go.
Okay, wonderful.
All right.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Just going to give you a moment to join us here live if you're joining us. I'm going to fix my lighting a little bit. We're just going to share. So if you're joining us live, please do jump into the comments. Let us know that you're here. We are broadcasting live through Zoom, so we can't really see the comments as clearly, but I'm going to keep them on my phone. So if you please do jump in, say hello in the comments, any questions or shares, please do feel free to share. Today we are with Damien Bowler. We have with us today, we're going to talk about beyond the polarity of attachment. A lot of you joined us last week where we spoke about the anxious avoidant attachment dynamic, which is quite a common pairing. And we're going to take it further today with Damien, because Damien is really, you go really deep into this topic with your evolutionary relating system, right, Damien?
Well, it's not. It's more inherent in the work that I do than explicit. It's more so the work that I do is different. I approach attachment just because of my own fascination and personal frustration that has had me dive deep into that. My work on the side is just actually about creating intimacy, which then helps. You know, it helps all of that, but we don't go explicitly into that in the work that I personally do. It's more about creating healthy communication patterns, and so that we can develop more genuine intimacy. And then that's one of the features that we're going to need if we actually want really deep, meaningful relationships. And the other one is to deal with our attachment issues. Well, there are a couple of others, but to deal with our attachment issues and move in towards kind of what I've been thinking of as a higher order polarity. And so that's kind of where we're going to go a bit today.
That's where we're going today, and I love that you. So it was you that put forward that title of today of Beyond the Polarity of Attachment, because what's happening for a lot of people out there, and probably a lot of people watching, is that they don't realize that their unconscious patterning of, which is this attachment style, right, which is learned in childhood through our family system, our caregivers, our parents. And a lot of people don't realize how strongly that influences the the polarity attraction pull between two people, right? They just, oh, I'm just attracted to certain people because that's my type. Chemistry or whatever, right? So maybe go into that a little bit, like what is happening when people feel that draw towards each other. And like we spoke about last week, common pairing is the anxious avoidant. They seem to be like irresistibly drawn together. So what's happening there?
Well, there's several different common pairings. If we're looking at an attachment system that has anxious or preoccupied anxious, dismissive avoidant, and fearful avoidant. And it's often anxious and dismissive avoidant, or anxious and fearful avoidant, or fearful avoidant and dismissive avoidant. Those are the kind of the three combinations. When fearful avoidants get with dismissive avoidance, they end up becoming really anxious. So they kind of start swinging into a deeper anxiety. Because there can only be one avoidant in a relationship. So this is where we get into polarity, because a relationship needs polarity. That's what causes an attraction. That's what causes all the way, like all the way through, kind of from the smallest element of our universe all the way up to the greatest one. Everything is in this polarity relationship. We are in a dual
Yeah.
universe. So polarity underlies the structure of this universe. So if we look at an atom is formed by a polarity between the nucleus, or the proton in particular, and the electron, and they have a dynamic tension between them that causes them to create this unit. So we do the same thing in relationships. A relationship, if there's no polarity in a relationship, it's a dead. There's no point to be together. So we
That's when,
come
and that
together.
happens after a certain period of time, right? That people are in a relationship and they kind of go, oh, you know, it was good in the beginning, but it kind of, the energy gets quite flat, right?
Mm-hmm. So that's a different track, but yes, that's the polarity leaks out, and suddenly we're just best friends with no actual polarity between us, and as a result, the relationship's not very exciting anymore, and there's no the reason to stay together becomes less compelling. So when we look at the attraction being the basis for polarity, this is what you mentioned before. This is kind of our childhood structure, our childhood relation, or sometimes a way to think of it is our unconscious definition of love is what was mirrored to us as a child. And so we have this pattern in our mind of like, oh, this is what love means to me. And we go out in the world seeking it. And then we find someone and they represent that unconscious definition of love, which is generally steeped in some form of abandonment. And we go, oh my God, love, this person, everything. And what we're actually done is because as a child, we need an immense amount of attunement. That's basically, our brain is wired for survival, and we have some primitive structures in our brain that say, if I'm in danger, I have psychological responses that I basically take my frontal cortex offline and put me into a survival mode, fight, flight, freeze, and also fawn people look at as well as a response. So as a child, the moment I'm not attuned to, if my parent does not give me the level of attunement that I need, my brain says I may die here and I need to create a response. And so we start getting wired to have these particular responses in our brain and our body. So we're wired for stress. So we start becoming wired for a stress state. So we start to equate love and care as stressful. We don't know that we're doing this, but we have a stress state. So when we pair up with someone, I'm preoccupied, anxious, or I'm avoidant, and I get drawn to that experience, which is a stressful experience, I start having stress hormones cascading through my body. I get spikes of adrenaline and dopamine, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm under a stress. It's love. I'm in a state of distress. This is love. This person is triggering all my chemistry. You know, this is, I used to get really frustrated, and I would ask, what is it that you most seek in a partner? And one of the most common responses is chemistry, 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 chemistry. I want chemistry. Well, chemistry is stress hormones. It is the addiction to the crack pipe, cocaine. You know, that's what we're talking about as chemistry, is something that keeps us in an elevated arousal, and not a good kind of arousal. Although we've equated this form of arousal with sexual arousal, and we think that we need to be in a state of stress in order to be turned on. So we've kind of like, we've got it really confused in that we see that heightened arousal state, sympathetic dominance, the state, you know, the people we're most attracted to are the ones we become an idiot around. We can't speak properly, and we become stumbling over our words because we're in stress. We're in a stress state. And when we're in a stress state, our frontal cortex goes offline. Our ability to be calm and relaxed and socially engaged and playful and flirty and banter and intelligent and witty, it all goes offline. So when we start feeling like, oh, I'm tongue-tied around this person and I can't stop thinking about them, that's a warning sign that actually I'm in a distress state.
Yeah. And that kind of like, to be honest, it doesn't happen to me that often, but it did happen to me in the, like, I would say about 2 years ago, where this chemistry was so insane, and I never ended up with the person because it was a professional type arrangement, but we had this very strange, like, it was very strange. It was like my heart would be racing. I could feel my heart like in my throat, like, and it was this really strange thing where I would actually have to take really deep breaths. And I'm not like a shy person or an insecure, like I can speak to anyone, I can go on stage and speak, and you know, all that stuff is fine. But this person, this man used to just bring this out of me where I would actually have to physically work on calming myself down. And what you're describing is that, like, that kind of response, some people actually equate that as being a positive connection, right?
Mm-hmm. I mean, and
I
even
did
to,
not personally.
yeah,
I
yeah.
knew this was not good for me. I was like, I can't even speak around this person.
I
But
mean, but that's the
speak that.
extreme. That's the extreme side of it. You know, that's an extreme example of it. But the mild one, the heart palpitations, the flutters in the belly, the butterflies, the little beads of sweat that roll down the armpits, like all of these things, and then we go, oh, like I'm really, you know, and getting aroused by the person as well. We think that this is this is signs that I'm in deep attraction with this person. Yet,
Mm,
if I'm not feeling relaxed and calm, so we can have those things from a relaxed state as well, but it takes a little bit longer. It's not
yeah.
immediate, you know? So if I'm, and how quick are we to go yes, no to somebody? Oh, this person is like triggering attraction in me. This person isn't. I'm going to throw that person away who isn't. I'm going to dismiss them straight away. I'm not, there's no chemistry. Well, we
Yeah.
don't actually know yet because if we're insecurely attached, and many of us are, and if we're listening to this and we're curious about this, more than likely we have an insecure attachment style, then every form of attraction is based on our insecurity. What we believe
Yeah.
is attraction is insecurity speaking. When we don't know what secure attraction feels like, and it's not going to feel exciting at first.
That's so interesting because it's counterintuitive to our culture and to what we see, like on movies, and what we even like.
Love songs, you know, love songs are like the
Yeah.
classic. It's all about I can't live without you, and like
And it's
that's not
unhealthy.
healthy.
Right. And probably, and I know, like, we, you know, and at the end of the day, these things are just, you know, studies and statistics that may or may not be exactly accurate. But, you know, we spoke about this, how, and my personal feeling on it is that probably there are less securely attached people than even the statistics say, because a lot of people might kind of misidentify, because, you know, let's face it, these patterns only really show up strongly in the initial stages of a relationship. Like,
Not necessarily in the initial stages. So for
really?
me, yeah, for me, I've had two long-term relationships in my life, and in both of them, for the first year, I was kind of a little bit, I was a little bit more on the avoidance side. I was a little bit like, meh, I'm not really that interested. About a year in, something happened, and suddenly I became immensely anxious. About
Mm,
a year into both times, almost about a year in exactly, something flipped in me and I became so anxious, and it flipped. And all of a sudden they became avoidant and I became anxious, and I had lost myself completely. Um,
wow.
and it was horrifying. You know, the relationship continued for quite a few years after that, both times, but I was a mess for the rest of the time. I was
Mm,
non-functional in most aspects of my life apart from the relationship, and it was horrible. So it's not necessarily immediately. It they happen when we become emotionally invested in somebody. So in
right.
these two relationships, it took about a year for me to become emotionally invested. And all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, I'm in love with this person. Then I was a mess.
And then it kicked in.
Then it kicked in. The moment I recognized that I was in love, this definition of
Or you
love,
allowed
which I really,
yourself.
yeah, which I realize now the definition of love is to me is like being an absolute anxious mess. You know, that's actually
Mm,
not really love. It's just my attachment pattern being triggered.
that's interesting. And you know, the one thing that you mentioned when we were talking, like before this chat, which I thought that phrase was just so, like, that's like a total like quotable moment. Is like, we like we get into relationship, maybe you'll phrase it properly, but like, we get into relationships to finish our childhood or to complete our childhood. What's the phrase?
I can't remember the phrase that I made. I mean, it was 3 a.m. when I was talking to you.
So it was something like, you know, we get into romantic relationships to complete our childhood.
Yeah,
So
we're seeking, we tend to be seeking, we tend to be seeking romantic partnerships to complete the bonding experience that we didn't have with our parents. So what happens is, if we're insecurely attached, the reason we are insecurely attached is because we did not complete a bonding experience with our parents. So we did not develop the full autonomy from our parents. And as a result, we still have a bond, like this kind of bond that wasn't done. So a secure child is basically one that knows that they are held and loved and fully cared for by their parents. And as a result, at their own pace, they start to create independence from their parents, and they go out into the world independent of their parents, and they're free.
Yeah.
And as a result, they have this dependable relationship with their parents. And so as a result, they're kind of free from it. You know,
Yeah.
in indigenous cultures, I've read a little bit about it. They'll do things like, in the first few years of a child, the child is with the mother constantly, never away from it. And in our Western culture, we say, whoa, you're going to create a needy child if you do that. But in indigenous cultures, the child is with the parent constantly, in the same bed, never away, until the child starts moving away of their own accord. The child chooses their own timing for separation. And as a result, they know they don't have to look behind them at the playground and wonder if mum's going to be there or not, because they know deeply embodied inside of them, mum's there. So they have an internal map of someone's there for them that they can draw from forever. An insecurely child didn't have that. So in the anxious side, there's an inconsistent, there's bonding, there's availability, but there's an inconsistency to it. It's there sometimes it's not.
It's not
And so there's a
reliable.
bit of, it's not reliable, but it's reliable enough to feel I don't have to give up, but I'm on the edge of giving up. So an anxious child is the one that goes into the playground and like is constantly looking over the shoulder. Is mum still there? And then we'll go a little bit into the playground and then run back, and then go out a little bit and run back, but can never fully engage into the playground. Whereas an avoidant child has given up, been like, mum's not there for me, so I'm just like, fuck it, you know, I'm just going to go off into the playground and do my own thing and not even care. You know, they won't even look at mum at all. I don't need you. I don't need you anymore. So an anxious person has internalized the childhood. There's something wrong with me. The reason why my mum wasn't present for me is there's something wrong with me, you know. And I don't want to blame mothers at all, because it's an incredibly challenging job to raise a child, particularly in our culture, which does not teach healthy parenting. You know? And most mothers are really doing the best they can. So this is not a parent hating business at all.
No,
it's happened.
And ultimately, it's like, you know, I am a parent, and I actually, and the style of parenting that you describe, like in our Western culture, it's been called attachment parenting, right? Where you just have the child with you all the time. You know, and I did that, but that was just kind of a little bit instinctual for me. I wasn't really following manuals or whatever. But definitely I would say that, like, no matter what you do, and that's one thing that I think only a parent can kind of really know intrinsically, is like, no matter what you do, there are still things that you're doing, even unconsciously, that are going to create some level of wounding. It just cannot be avoided. Like, there's no such thing as an unwounded, untraumatized child. There's going to be some trauma, like not major, but like kind of day to day, what we would consider normal. That's going to be fairly common. So another thing I wanted to bring up was, I was looking back through some of your content, and there was one particular post that just really stood out to me, where you had described, like, and you were speaking about your own particular kind of inner dialogue around, like, the avoidant in me has like one foot out the door, and the anxious in me is trying to secure all these assurances and like guarantees, and like trying to like cling on for dear life. And then the secure is just like not any of those things, and it's just present moment to moment, and we'll see where this goes kind of thing. Like, and I was reading that and I was kind of seeing myself in all of those places at
Hmm.
times. Is that common?
Hmm.
We all have moved through each of those three?
Well, the way that I've been looking at it is that if we're insecurely attached, we're insecurely attached. That's the foundation of it. And then as a result, we have aspects of all of them. And in different contexts and in different moments, we're going to show up in these different ways and in different relationships. Um, and then it's going to be when we're extremely emotionally invested in someone that our major pattern will start coming out. You know, for a fearful avoidant, when they become really invested in someone, they're going to bail. They're going to hide. They're going to like be under the staircase, tremoring and being like, "Oh my God, I'm feeling too much about this person. I need to get away." For a dismissive avoidant, once they start feeling connected, they're gonna find as many reasons as they can to not be connected. They're
Ooh,
gonna they're gonna
let's go
find
into that
reasons.
one. That sounds like a juicy one that maybe people don't realize. Because so like for anyone watching, like I'm sure you can resonate with a time where you were like, oh, there's this person I'm seeing and there's all this good stuff, but it's like, but there's this thing wrong, and maybe there's this, and maybe there's this other thing. And generally, if you go out on the internet and you start doing searches or you start looking into like relationship coaches or dating coaches, you start seeing their content, you find someone to justify that that's not the one and you should just leave it. So
Mhm,
in reality, it's good to recognize that like that could be just your avoidant patterning looking for a reason to bail.
mhm. So what I was saying before is like an anxious person has internalized there's something wrong with me. That's why I didn't get what I wanted, what I needed.
Mm.
An avoidant person has internalized there's something wrong with you. That's why I didn't get what I wanted. It's your fault. And so an avoidant person, when the avoidance is triggered, it's externally, I'm going to be looking at you with hyper scrutiny, analyzing every single little thing about you to find something wrong. And when I find something wrong, I'm going to blow it up big and I'm going to make that the reason why this is never going to work. And
Yes.
and then I'm also going to have one foot out the door waiting for the idealized partner. And as an
Oh,
avoidant person, the idealized partner is going to be someone more avoidant than me, really.
oh, wow.
So yeah, so the reality is no one's
How many
perfect.
people do that though? They're like, oh no, this wasn't the one.
That's right. This wasn't the one. There's this little thing
Maybe the
wrong
one
or
is
that little thing.
next
The
month.
next one, the next one.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
there is
yeah.
no one. Yeah, yeah. That's the idea of the one is, I believe, fairy tale thinking based on insecure attachment. It's basically when we say we're
Wow.
looking for the one, we're looking for our mum.
Oh
The one is our
my
mum.
God, that's so good. We're looking for our mom.
The one is our mum.
And this is actually I actually have heard that comment that said before, but though you forget and you've just reminded me. And it's like because of the way our attachment is so intense in our like the mother and the baby, it's like the baby until it gets to a certain age, it actually its consciousness like merged with the mother. It's
It's
like
fused.
it thinks that we're the same unit,
There's no differentiation.
form a distinction or a separation until like I don't know, is it age one or something, and that is actually a traumatic experience the first time that the baby recognizes that the mom and me are not the same unit, we're actually separate. And that's the first, like, not the first wound, because I'm sure there's previous ones, but that is a core wound that we all have, is that moment that we realized that we lost the sense of oneness.
Exactly. We often try and go back to that state of infantile oneness rather than recognizing that where we want to go is forward into a conscious state of oneness. That's the
Yeah,
difference.
I
The
like
different dilemma.
conscious chosen oneness, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mm,
And the only way I can have oneness is through true differentiation.
yes.
The one state is really a state of we, you and I. So I need to be identified and differentiated as a sovereign being, I, relating to you as a sovereign being. And then
Yes.
through our relating, we start to create, there's we.
The
a
we,
space between us.
the
That
space
we
between.
is that possibility of oneness. It happens between us,
Yes.
and it only happens through our sovereignty.
Yes, and that is a piece that people miss as well, is that sometimes, and I believe this is more the anxious style of attachment, right? Is where they really want to merge.
I want to dive into you. Yeah.
They want to just merge and they want there to be no separation at all. And what does that do? I don't know, is this actually moving into a new layer of attraction? But what that does to like uh, polarity or sexual chemistry is it just destroys it, because you need to have this sense of other to be able to feel that polarity, right? It's like there's no polarity anymore if you're merged. And that's when people find that they're very close and they're very intimate and we touch a lot and we're close, but sexually it's not there. And that's where distance, like whether it's energetic or like physical, or just, you know, in terms of like just creating the sense of we're not merged all the time, can introduce that polarity again.
Yeah. I mean, distance isn't quite the word that I would use. It's sovereignty.
Sovereignty.
So if I'm sovereign and you're sovereign, we can be as close as we fucking want. We can get
Yeah.
right up with each other, because I know I'm not going to lose myself in you, and you know you're not going to lose yourself in me. And if you're more avoidant, you know I'm not going to lose myself in you. You know, because that's the conscious, the overt terror of the avoidant is basically losing themselves, and the overt terror
Yes.
of the anxious is losing the other. So the anxious I'll throw myself away in order to maintain the other. And that's that merging thing. It's like my sense of sovereignty doesn't matter as long as I stay with you. Whereas the avoidant is more like the sense of us doesn't matter as long as I maintain myself.
And
You don't matter as long as I keep me.
yes, yes, yes. And that's and what you've described there, like the anxious one, they're throwing away their sense of sovereignty. But a lot of anxious people might have never even developed a full sense of sovereignty, right?
To a degree, neither the avoidant nor the anxious have. And as a result, intimacy is not actually happening in these relationships. It looks like it, but it's not actually intimacy. We're not actually with each other because neither of us are distinct. The avoidant is living behind more of a state of walls, so they're never actually truly being seen or felt. And the avoidant is like got no sense of differentiation or boundaries. The anxious, sorry, has got no real differentiation of self. And so there's no real intimacy. Intimacy is relating to another sovereign being. You know, I have to be
Yeah,
sovereign to be seen.
yeah. And one thing I wanted to kind of point out there. So when we were talking about like that the avoidant one is doing this thing where they're like, you know, they've got one foot out the door, they're waiting for the one who this might not be the one, maybe it's the next one, and the whole picking apart the other person, saying, you know, well, they had all this fault, this fault, this fault, this fault, which were not even things you noticed in the beginning, but now you're picking them apart now that it's getting closer to that place where you might have to commit
Mm-hmm.
lose them. So that's that. But like, what would be some signs like that the anxious one does, that like, because I never heard those examples you just gave as signs of avoidance before. Because I would have
Yeah.
just thought, oh, you know, that's just because it's not the right person for you.
Mm-hmm.
So like,
Well, the
anxious do, that's kind of tricky to identify.
Well, it's not tricky. It's much more easier. It's more overt
Okay.
in the anxious. It's much easier to see, and it's essentially preoccupying thoughts. So being unable to stop thinking about the other person. So the anxious goes on a date, and then after the date thinks about the person all the way until the time of the next date, constantly thinking about the person, wanting to message them all the time, or messaging them and then constantly checking back to see if they've read the message. These kind of behaviors, or if there seems to be a little bit, it's like embarrassing the amount of times I've done these things myself, being quite anxious. Or like if there's a problem in the relationship, to write walls and walls of text, to write these long, massive emails proclaiming, you know, how we want to do it better, and, you know, all the love things, and then like to write poetry and love songs and just like on it, like anything, like it's a lot of commotion. Basically everything starts becoming revolving around this person. They're the signs. So the early warning signs is I've been out on a date with this person, and now I'm noticing that they're intruding into my thoughts constantly. From then on, the next day I can't stop thinking about them. I go into work or something and I'm grinning and like super excited because I had this lovely date and I want to tell everyone about it, and it's just playing through my mind all the time. And every time I think of this person, I get the flutters in my belly, you know, we've been on one date, you know. And now I'm thinking about, and I'm thinking about what it might be like when we're like having a long-term relationship, or we're
That's
going on a
actually a good
holiday
one.
together. You know,
Projecting
yeah,
fantasy into the future, right?
I'm planning our holiday for 6 months for now, and like, you know, and what it might be, what kind of house we could live in together, and how many kids we might have. And I'm like, we've been on one date or two dates, and I'm fucking gone.
And isn't it strange now that I'm kind of going, oh, that's kind of cute though.
Kind of cute. It's cute, but it's not like.
Yeah, honestly, I'm kind of going, oh, that's so cute.
Yeah, it's so cute, but to be on the inside of it, now that I recognize what it is to be on the inside of it, now I'm like, I've started equating it with myself of like, oh my God, this is terrifying, actually, because I'm gone. Like, I am now gradually slipping away from myself. And you better believe the rest of my life is going to start becoming unmanageable. My hobbies are
Yeah.
going to start, I'm going to lose interest in my own hobbies. I'm going to lose interest in my work. I'm going to lose interest in my friends. Like, slowly, little bit by little bit, maybe even quickly, I'm going to lose interest in everything about my life except for this person, and they're going to become the universe.
You're
I'm going to go
everything.
back to that infantile state where this person is my mum, and that's all. That's all
And
there
they're my
is this
everything.
person, and not even me. Yeah.
Mm. And I think this is great for people to recognize, because like the way you've just described it there, I'm sure lots of people can they see themselves in that behavior, you
And
know.
it feels good. It feels good to do that. Like, I can start thinking about the person, and every time I think about them, I get that rush, that exhilaration rush of like, oh, yumminess, because we just had a delicious date. But actually what I'm doing is I'm just having another line of Coke, but I'm doing it in my imagination. I'm just
Love,
getting
love
another
Coke.
hit. I'm just getting another hit of stress chemicals, basically.
Yes. And so there was something really interesting as well about when we spoke about this, and you were saying what is really interesting for me to hear from you was, because a lot of people, and I would have really relied on intuition a lot, especially a lot of women really do rely on intuition a lot for a lot of decisions. And the point here being that if you're in this patterning of insecure, avoidant, insecure, anxious, you can't really rely on your intuition in the
Your
same.
radar's broken.
Your radar is a little bit broken when it comes to love. So like what you described to me, and maybe you could go into it now, is how like in order to begin to move past this pattern of attachment or this pattern of attraction and to become more conscious, you actually have to like consciously like operate a little bit counterintuitively for yourself. So
Yeah.
go into that, maybe how that works.
Yeah. Yeah. So if we're wired in a certain way, we've been wired in this insecure way, that means our radar is looking for that. We're scanning for this unconscious definition of love. And when I meet someone who fits that degree to some degree or another, I'm going to get activated and I'm going to see them as interesting. Anyone who doesn't fit that is going to immediately be categorized as not interesting. They are not activating me. Thus, I'm going to say my intuition tells me that this is not the right person. There's no chemistry, da, da, da. I'm going to find reasons to justify it. So when it's not reliable, and a good analogy of this is if my diet has consisted of McDonald's and KFC and Hungry Jack's or Burger King or whatever, if I've been living a junk food diet my entire life, then my intuition is going to tell me that I need the burger.
It tell you're
It's
craving.
going to tell me I'm going to need the Coke. It's a craving. It's not a real need. It's going to tell
It's
me that.
miscalibrated.
And then when I sit down and someone gives me a plate of like broccoli, you know, like a really healthy meal, I'm going to look at it and go, what is this? This is
Yeah.
gross. It's bland. There's no flavor. There's nothing interesting in this meal whatsoever for me. It doesn't feel good. My intuition is telling me that this is not what I want. Actually, what's telling me that I don't, that's not what I want is all the organisms inside of me that have adapted to wanting the junk food, you know,
Yeah.
they're telling me that's not what's right for me.
But
However,
they're
if I
wrong.
stick with this, yeah, if I
Mm.
stick with this healthy food for a while, eventually over time, you know, and I've done this experiment with myself literally with food, sudden over time, the good food starts to taste good. Eventually
Yes.
broccoli, even plain broccoli starts to go, oh, that's actually feel, when I pay attention to the subtlety of flavors in my mouth, it actually tastes pretty good. And I start feeling better. My body starts to feel better. My skin will change. I'll start to feel healthier. I'll have more energy. But
Mm.
I have to go through that period of doing something that does not feel particularly good.
Doesn't
It feels
feel
wrong.
intuitive.
Does
Yeah.
not feel intuitive. It feels wrong. And the same thing happens when we're wanting to rewire our insecure pattern. We have to put down the Coke. We have to put down the McDonald's. We have to say, I'm not taking that anymore. I'm going to try and eat broccoli, and it's going to be boring as hell for a while. And, you know, and we're looking at, to heal insecure attachment, we're looking at 2 years. You know, we're looking at 2 years of
Yes.
counterintuitive behavior. It gets easier over time, but those first few months are going to be like, and I've done this myself, just one more of this person, just one more of this type of woman, just one. I'm just going to see this woman who's destroying my life one more time, you know, because I want that hit. You know, we have to go through withdrawal,
Yeah.
and then we have to start leaning towards something that is not that interesting at beginning, and we have to go on a bunch of dates, and I'm going to go on a date and be like, I don't feel anything for this person, so I better go on
Mm.
another date. So it's probably good to go on
Wow.
another date, you know, and it's probably good. And I'm noticing my brain going, just a friend, or yeah, no, this is, yeah, definitely. Or just a lover. I can't see a relationship ever forming with her. You know, we do this categorization, these immediate categorizations. These are insecure patterns. The secure pattern,
Yes.
I don't know. Actually, I don't know. I want a lot more information before I make a choice. I want to see this person a lot more times, and I want to see what actually happens between us and what happens when we're meeting in a state of calmness. So this is the distinction where we're actually needing to rewire our nervous system to be aroused by eustress, positive stress, by a calm state. So we can be incredibly turned on in a relaxed state. We can have deep, loving feelings in a relaxed state. And
That's
that's what we're going
interesting.
for. And it's going to feel
And
strange.
is that what you're saying? Like the calm feelings, like that's more the anxious person gets stressed out by a new connection, right? Because the avoidant wouldn't feel particularly stressed out, right?
No, the avoidant pattern to disengage is a stress response.
Yeah.
But the avoidant relates to stress by I need time alone. The avoidant, and
Yeah.
whenever you hear that, like I just need to disengage from everyone and be alone, that's stress talking. The
Yes.
avoidant de-escalates in order to deal with stress. It wants to take everything away and
Yes.
basically numb it. I want to avoid feeling anything because it's too much. Intensity blows me out. I got to bail.
Yes. That's me.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
so
too much. I'm out. I'm like, I'm going to go do something else. I'm going to disengage completely. And then when I feel everything's fine, then I'll come back into connection. Meanwhile, the anxious person's like lost their mind, you know, because the
yeah,
avoidant
crying
person's
your eyes
literally
out.
dropped them, literally gone, dropped them, may not have actually intentionally dropped them, but has dropped them completely. And they're like, they don't know what's
Oh God.
happening. They don't have a clue what's happening. Is this person abandoning me? I don't know.
But let's put a caveat there because ghosting and all of that jazz, like that's not acceptable. But like if you're an avoidant pattern and you're gonna like communicate what you're feeling and say, I actually need this little bit of space right now because I'm feeling overwhelmed, like surely that's okay, right?
That is okay.
Yeah, and that's where we start coming into like the counterintuitive because it's like the
That's right.
avoidant, their intuition is telling them, wrong person, bail, run away. But if you were consciously, like counterintuitively, you're saying, no, okay, my pattern is telling me run away. I need to come in to open myself up to this person and say, I feel like I need to run away from you, but it's just because I'm feeling overwhelmed and blah, blah, blah. That would be the way of like healing or solving that pattern, would be to come into more sharing and intimacy, even though it feels icky for you.
Yep. Yeah. So the avoidant patterning is to de-escalate, to avoid, and to hide their vulnerability. They don't like being very vulnerable. So to rewire is to start becoming more available and more vulnerable, to lean in a little bit more. And all the
Yes.
avoidants watching this are going, oh my God, like, no, thank you. It's actually
Yeah.
to share. And so sometimes it may be like, even to recognize and start owning that, like, oh, I'm now noticing my avoidance come up, and I need to have a little bit of time, and I'm going to come back. I'm going to come back to you by the end of the day, actually, or by tomorrow morning, I will come back into connection.
Yeah.
I'm feeling scared. Even that saying that, like, I'm feeling scared or I'm feeling overwhelmed. I need to own the feeling, and I'm going to come back. I need to be reliable or consistent, you know?
Yeah.
So in order to become secure, we have to act secure, and we have to give security to the people around us. If we want to become secure, we have to act in a way
Yes.
that's secure. So for the
Because
avoidant,
when we're being avoidant or insecure or whatever, we're making the people around us act even more insecure as well.
that's right.
And
We're
then
all
it's
we're all in
this
a pack.
cycle.
That's right. And and we can't sit there and go, I'm insecure, so I need to find a secure partner, and then they're just going to have to deal with me. No, that's not what we want at all. We all want to become secure, because the kind of love and intimacy and relationships that we want doesn't exist when we're insecure. It's a fight. So we have to become secure. And the point of finding a secure partner, if you manage to win that lottery, is they'll help you become secure quicker by modeling to you secure behavior. Yet
Yes.
without them, we have to model it to ourselves. So I have to act in a secure manner. So for the avoidant, it is being more vulnerable, sharing more of your feelings, even the fearful ones, especially the fearful ones. I'm scared. I'm noticing that I'm getting really critical of you. And that's having me realize that I'm actually a little bit scared. And I'm actually scared of getting closer right now. I want to stay here, but I just need to slow down. Is it okay if we slow
Yes.
down a little
That's
bit?
beautiful.
But I'm not going away, and I'm actually not going away. And the anxious person, the counterintuitive behavior for the anxious person is, actually, I need to pay more attention to my own life. And when the avoidant person hits, so if the avoidant person was to say what I just said to an anxious person, it's like, oh, thank you. Like, I feel calm. My nervous system is now calming down. I know that you're here. I can feel you. You're letting me feel you. You're telling me you're going to be consistent. I'm now coming into a state of regulation with you. The anxious person needs to pay more attention to their own life. It's like, I'm actually going to be with my hobbies. Today, I don't want to see you because I've got 5 things I want to do, and I've got lots of other friends that I'm connecting with, and I've got all these different hobbies and all these different vocations, and I'm going to pay attention to my work.
What would that do to the avoidant person then? Would they not have a little
What
bit of a, oh, what do you mean you're not,
what does it
what do you mean you're not
a
going to
little bit
be available?
well, exactly. What does it do to you if I'm like, if you lean into more avoidant parts, and I'm like, and you let yourself feel kind of a connection between us, and I'm like, like, oh, I'll see you on Saturday, but until then I've got stuff to do, and I'll talk with you later.
Yeah, so there would be a part of me that would go, what do you mean you're not going to be like on the end of the phone whenever I need?
Uh-huh.
That
And
sounds so narcissistic, doesn't it?
there's the indignation. Well, that's the avoidant does want the hook. I want to be in control. I want you on my hook
Yeah,
all the
yeah.
time. You're available to me whenever I want it, but I'm not available to you whenever you want it. That's the avoidant kind of shadow.
Yes,
You have to be
yes.
always available to me, but I get to choose whether I want to be. I don't have to be available to you anytime.
Yeah, I'm really not as bad as that, but
No,
yeah.
I know you aren't. We're exaggerating here.
No, but yeah, I'm there are people like that, and that are literally like, keeping people on this like crazy cycle of like, when are they going to be available, when are they not? But
But
I
but
don't.
more so feel instead the sense that I'm not going to be on you all the time. I've got stuff to do, so you're not my sole source of connection. What does
Yes.
that feel like for you as an avoidant? Knowing that you're not the only one,
That I
apart from the indignation.
want for them.
Yeah.
So, I mean, consciously, my conscious brain is like, yeah, that's what I want. But there is a little bit of my inner self kind of going, what do you mean? What do you mean?
Mm-hmm.
I want to have you there whenever I need.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it is. But having said that, I don't want someone all up in my business
Yeah.
all day, every
So
day.
there's yeah, exactly. And there's the interesting, there's like that little bit of like, what do you mean, is like, it's almost like a little pathway. It's got to be played very carefully, but it's a little pathway into a different sort of polarity, because
Yes,
now you're no longer in control, and you've got to lean into that feeling of being a little bit out of control, which is
I
because
prefer
the
it though.
avoidant, exactly, you prefer it. The avoidant tries to get the control, and once they got the control, they want to get out because it's boring, and now the person just is completely fixated on them. So it's like,
Mm,
you've got to recognize that, oh, that little, what do you mean, and then not try and hook them. Don't hook them. Let that little, what do you mean, feeling
yes.
be a state of turn on. It's like, oh, this person, like, I actually want to support them to have their own life because it's turning me on.
Yes, and it does. And that's something that we wanted to move into today, which is where,
Mm-hmm.
like you say, some people think, oh, this dynamic, this is crazy, this is wrong. I need to leave this person and I need to find a more secure, very stable, ease-filled connection, which there's nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm.
But and I spoke to this on a post the other day as well, where there is like, and you need to feel into what the connection is. Like, if it's just crazy toxic dynamic, I'm not saying, oh yeah, do all this work to fix it or whatever. Maybe that's not the right decision for that dynamic. But where two people have a very good thing going on and there's just a little bit of a mismatch in your attachment patterns and you're triggering this kind of cycle, with becoming conscious of your pattern, you can actually achieve like amazing levels of healing together with your patterns, right?
Absolutely.
And like you say, when you can get conscious enough about yourself and your own behavior, and you're like, okay, so I've been using this person for my emotional like needs when it suited me, but then I was pulling away. And let me now not do that because I really value the erotic connection that we have. And I'm not going to keep throwing shit on top of that because eventually that's why relationships get very flat. We don't have that sense of awareness around, like you say, that little bit of charge. And it's not manipulative. It's not like, oh, let me like, angle my way into like having this supercharged relationship. People misinterpret what that is. It's about being conscious, like you say, and allowing yourself to not like just automatically pick up the phone and go, oh, what are you doing? Let them
Mm-hmm.
be that little,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I'm not going to use that person, to tell them every little thing that just happened, or,
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna like chill. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it's that little bit of conscious awareness, I think, that can really create, like you say, a new dynamic in the relationship. Like you say, I recognize this more recently as a more avoidant type person, but I wasn't aware I was. I recognized more recently that I had a tendency to attract men, and I would be attracted to them, like we would attract each other, but that I would always hold more of the control, right? And but I also recognize that I don't want that anymore. Like, I consciously want for my man to be in a dominant position.
Mm-hmm.
As unpopular as that might be to say, some people out there get very extremely triggered when women say stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But we're all at choice here.
Mm-hmm.
So when I came into that awareness, and I was like, I don't really want to be in control all the time. I'm tired. A lot of women are feeling that. So like that's almost what goes beyond when you start to heal this shadow patterning of the attachment stuff. Move beyond that. That's where you can now start to play with other polarities, like maybe the dominant submission. And that doesn't need to mean whips and dungeons. That could be an energetic dynamic.
Yeah. So to go back to the original premise of like attraction and relationship is based on polarity. There has to be some polarity there. And if we're insecurely attached, that polarity is our attachment dynamics. That's what creates the attraction. That's what creates the relationship. And that's what eventually implodes it. As we start to consciously rewire ourselves and start moving towards a secure pattern, there's going to be a period of time where it's going to plateau and be flat. As we're learning these new secure patterns, we're going to have to lean into eating broccoli and not having a lot of enjoyment from it. And then at some point, we realize that actually, if you put a little bit of olive oil and some sea salt and some roasted garlic, it's actually pretty good, you know? Actually, broccoli's all right. It makes you feel better. At some point, it comes alive again. So we go through the plateau period and then the alive comes again. And we start to have the opportunity for different types of polarity. And the one that is particularly exciting is what you're speaking to is the erotic polarity of dominance and submission. And so, again, it's not necessarily like BDSM, like it can go all the way up to kink and it can go all the way up to tying up and shibari and playing with whipping and all that stuff, but it's more just holding particular polarity where the man kind of leads the relationship and the woman kind of is in more of a surrendered position. However, the interesting thing is the submissive in the relationship is actually the one kind of leading the relationship in a way that it's her consent and it's her feelings and her desire that has the dominant respond to and take us in that direction. So there's an incredible amount of attunement that happens in that form.
Woman is leading the desire aspect. So it's like female-led desire. And
that's right.
Actually, this type of dynamic is female-led. It is the woman that is calling the man into this position where he's kind of going, "What do you mean? This is not okay. Like,
it's like
we're supposed to be equal.
I want you to tell me what to do. You know, I want you to choose where
I want
going.
you to be a little bit." And this is something I spoke to with you as well, where it's like, what. And you're very aware, obviously. I mean, this is what you do and you're fully tuned in, but a lot of men maybe, or younger men, don't really realize that sometimes when a woman like me, who is quite powerful, confident, everything like that, is pushing you, it's not because I want you to like be a pushover, it's because I want you to push back.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's not me physically pushing, but it's like
I get you.
trying to dominate in my energy, and I want you to like say, no, actually there's a line here and I've just stated what that line is. And that gives me a little bit of turn on because I'm like, oh, you push back, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then the woman leads through her desire and her feelings, like, oh, I really love to go somewhere like really romantic tonight. And then that's it, nothing else. And then the man comes in and goes, okay, I'm going to sort that out, you know, and then creates this experience that the woman surrenders into. You know, that's a more romantic version of it, but the bedroom version of it too, you know, it's like, I want to be taken and ravished by you. And then the man just does it.
Absolutely.
I feel like being ravished. And then that's it. And there's no, the moment the woman goes, and this is how I want it, and it needs to be this way and that way and that way, then it's gone, all the polarity's gone. But if it's left as this open-ended kind of thing, then the man goes, sweet, yeah, I'm going to figure that. We love problem solving when we're in our masculine. Give us a problem to solve.
Like being given a problem to solve. And
that's right.
Problem solve. And you also like to win, right?
We like to win. We like to problem solve. And we like to know that what we're doing is right and good, you know, and that's where the consent
pleasing.
Yeah, I mean, just like that, I'm, you know, if we're in a good man, that I'm doing something that you actually really want, you know, that is okay for you, that I'm not hurting you, you know, we want to protect and provide.
Provision. And this is actually a really, really key distinction. I feel like a lot of women really are very locked in on this idea of provision being financial only.
Mm-hmm.
Provision does not mean financial only. Provision can mean any number of things. It's what does
Mm-hmm.
this person provide to you? What does this man provide to you? And are you satisfied with what he is willing or able or good at providing?
Mm-hmm.
That does
The
not.
experience, really. You
Yeah,
know,
I mean, and
it's
a lot
what
of women
it's
are
the provision of an
financially
experience.
sovereign, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and they're really hell bent on this thing of, oh, he earns less than me. Okay, but are you satisfied with the stuff he does provide or he is providing? Is that,
Or can you allow yourself to be
can
satisfied?
you allow yourself to be satisfied with that? And can you rest in, like, you're in a dominant position in your daily life, can you enter into a more submissive state in your relationship and allow him to be a leader in that space? If you're used to leading everything else in your life, like, why not? That's a nice relief for you.
And so to kind of like connect this back first is that this dominant submission, devotion, surrender, this kind of polarity, it
Hmm.
we can't get there if we're insecurely attached. It's going to be a nightmare. If we start
Hmm.
bringing it in, it's just going to be sitting over the top of our insecure patterns, which will start hijacking us anyway. So
That
I
will get
feel
very messy.
it will get messy. So it's something that naturally arises as we go through this process of healing our attachment wounds. And so we got to look at different configurations in a way. So there's one way where we have an anxious man and an avoidant woman. And that's that state of like the anxious man starting to take control of his own life and starting to learn to be in a more dominant position, and the avoidant woman starting to learn to like want to want that and to actually empower that and actually encourage that. So to be able to show up, be a little bit more vulnerable, share more of the feelings, lean in a little bit further, let herself feel a little bit of anxiety, not too much, you know, let herself be in that kind of less in control position will be the thing that needs to happen in that one. Whereas the anxious man needs to go, right, I'm actually going to take more control of my life. I'm going to spend more time with my friends and doing my hobbies. I'm going to say no to you more often.
I'm going to be dominant.
And that's going to start to create that polarity at the same
Yes.
time as healing our insecure attachment.
Yeah, it's doing both.
It's doing both.
That's
On the other side, we have a little bit of a trickier one where we have an anxious woman and an avoidant man, because that's going to look like the dom sub polarity already, but it's not. So
mm,
that's where it gets tricky, where the anxious woman is already in the out of control position, and the dominant man, the avoidant man, is already in the in control position. So that requires the dominant man to become more reliable, the avoidant man, sorry,
yeah.
to become more reliable, to actually show up, to reveal more of himself, to be consistent, to kind of give up this sense of like, I've got one foot out the door, to give up this, I've got six other women in the waiting rooms, you know, like
Yeah.
he's going to have to give up some of that. And the anxious woman is going to have to stop preoccupying, and she's going to have to go more along the lines of, you're only one man that I'm considering, and I'm going to consider several other men at the same time. She's going to have to learn to date more widely, not focus in and narrow in on one person until they're able to show up consistently and repeatedly, and pay more attention to her own life, develop her hobbies, make sure she's got a wide range of friends and a network of people she's connected to, that she's able to keep her nervous system calm, and that if any of the men start becoming way too avoidant, that she's willing to just be like, no, if they're not going to
Know
show
what
up, I'm
this
going to
does
let
to
them
me,
go.
kind of thing.
I'm going to let them go. So that's a different pathway. And then over time, it can start to move towards this more polarized relationship. So it just depends where we are and what we're going to do. And the counterintuitive behavior, I think, is going to be the same, whether we're a man or a woman. You know, we're going to have to do the opposite of what we normally do.
Yeah.
But how we enter into this kind of more polarized, masculine, feminine polarized relationship, and we're speaking for heterosexual people here. I don't know what it would be like in non-heterosexual couples. I'm sure there's other more complex and interesting dynamics there. But yeah, we're going to have to enter into that over time. And something that I like, that I find frustrating, and that like we've got to understand, is that sexual chemistry is not that hard to create. It's not that hard to create sexual arousal between two people. Get a little bit of intimacy, little bit of polarization, spend a little bit of time touching, and more than likely you get aroused. Have some good sex once or twice, and that's it. You'll have a wired arousal for this person. So the I need sexual chemistry as the top of the list of things we're looking for, to me, is a wrong approach, because that's hooked into our insecure attachment pattern. So we've got to realize that some of these things, love and sexuality, are actually not that difficult to create. It's the security and the logistical compatibility that is the hard thing to create. So those are the things to look for at the top of the level, and then recognize that these other things can happen over time. Go on 5 dates with somebody before you decide they're not sexually attractive. Not one date and go, no, there was no chemistry, I'm out. No, that's a good sign. I didn't feel any chemistry. Well, did you feel safe? Yeah, I felt safe. Well, maybe go on another date.
What if you feel sexual chemistry and you feel safe?
Well, then you're on a winner.
You won the lottery.
You won the lottery. But I suggest that if we're insecurely attached, those things do not happen concurrently at the beginning. And that's a hard thing to get with. So it's almost like we have to give up the Big Mac, and go through that period of time of craving. So I'm going to share something quite embarrassing.
Oh, go on.
I mean, it's embarrassing for me because I have standards. The other day my van broke down a few hours away from where I am, and it's been at a mechanic's there. And so it's been a whole saga, my car. And I drove down to get it the other week, and I picked it up and I drove it away from mechanics, and I'm driving away and I get about half an hour, 40 minutes away from mechanics, and it broke down again.
Oh my gosh.
So I called them up and they're like, okay, where are you? Okay, I'll get back to you. And then he's like, there's been a big accident in town. My tow trucks are unavailable. So I had to wait. And I waited for 3 hours in my van to get picked up. And eventually I got picked up. I got brought back to mechanics. They gave me a courtesy car to drive. But it was now 10 o'clock at night, and I was hungry. I hadn't eaten anything since lunch. I was starving. So the only thing that was open was McDonald's. And I went and ate McDonald's. And I think it's been more than 10 years since I ate McDonald's. Like probably even more than that, probably like 13 years or something since the last time I ate that, right? So I ate McDonald's and I was like, oh, this is kind of nice. And then I found myself craving it for 3 days after. I was craving it constantly. I wanted that taste again. I'm like, what? I didn't do it again, but I was like, what is happening? I'm craving this thing again. Yeah. So that's a really good analogy of like, when we get that spark, we're going to be hooked back into the
Did you go on Tinder?
Again.
Did you go on Tinder straight after? You're like,
no.
Tinder, let's go.
Go on Tinder, watch some porn, have some cigarettes, like I go the whole way, No, I didn't.
Wild.
Yeah, because I'm aware of, suddenly I'm in that addictive brain again, craving this thing. And so the same thing happens for our attachment, is that if I get that, oh yeah, that excitement that is my insecure attachment pattern, and I have that, I'm now back at square one again. I've just picked up my addiction again, and I'm going to have to go through the detoxification and withdrawal process again. For alcoholics, when they go into rehab, the first part is detoxification and withdrawal, and it's an incredibly painful process for anyone who's ever struggled with addiction. And the same thing happens in our insecure attachment. It is an addiction. And when we start getting hit, and when we meet that person who brings up that insecure attachment, it's going to be so hard to let them go. We're going to want to go back, and we're going to go back, and we want to go back. My last relationship was that. And it was over and over and over again until I was destroyed, and this is what we have to stop doing. So it's like, do I feel safe? Good. Move towards that. Security. I coined this phrase, be so fucking secure it's dangerous. And it's dangerous to our attachment patterns, because if I'm that secure, and I show up insecurity, your insecure patterns can't play anymore. You have to do something different, or you'll go away from me. Either
Yes.
way, good. You know, if you go away, if I'm acting secure and you and I, we go on a date and then you disappear, good. Thank you for not letting me get addicted.
Yes. And maybe that would be a good place to end, because I remember when we were talking about this on our call before, how, you know, like you say, for me as an avoidant and you as more of an anxious, for me, I always would have said that the other person was the problem, right? Like you say, it's very typical of avoidance that all
And
that.
I'll say I'm the problem.
Yes, yeah. And I actually have friends, and this is probably common maybe with friendships as well. Like I have friends that would be more in the anxious, and I would always be saying to them, "Why do you always think you're doing things wrong?" Like I never do that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting how you know to recognize that. But and like I was saying to you, it's like the first time that I realized, you know what, I might be the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was relatively recently, where I kind of thought, you know what, how many of the people in my life like that I've just dropped like a hotcake, and that I've really hurt them. And I always had this complete justification in my behavior that they were being,
That's their problem.
well, they were being really clingy and annoying and not respecting of me and my boundaries. I mean, this is all a really common narrative nowadays, right? So the
Mm-hmm.
person
Mm-hmm.
didn't respect my boundaries and they're just being all really annoying and blah, blah, blah. Well, you know, you don't just cut people out of your life like that love you, you know. And like that's something that I had to come to terms with. Whoa, people just with a very intense pattern, they're just really like, you know, like I really triggered them by doing that. I really plunged them into some sort of hell, and I didn't feel good when I recognized that about myself, you know.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think, and I think both sides probably need to take a little bit of a look at themselves and kind of a little
Absolutely.
responsibility, because the reason I felt justified in my behavior is because I do feel really unsafe when someone is really clingy on me. Like that,
Mm-hmm.
it's not me trying to hurt them, it's actually me trying to protect myself,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So,
Absolutely.
same token, I'm sure for you, you've had moments of kind of reckoning where you go, whoa, I did that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I know we're wrapping up, so I'm like, wow, there's like so much in there that could continue to dive into.
Oh, yeah.
Um, yeah. So, but I'll leave some of it. Well, one thing that I want to just taste on, but I don't really need to dive into, is a lot of what people call boundaries are actually walls, particularly on the avoidance side. It's a wall, not a boundary. And that withdrawing from someone without giving them warning is a boundary violation. Actually, it's a negative boundary. It's a negative violation. So if I'm leaning over into your space and like being too clingy on you, yeah, I'm crossing your boundaries. However, as an avoidant, if you disappear or disengage without any warning, you violated my boundaries. We
Yeah.
don't see that. We don't recognize that. But if there's intimacy between us and there's some kind of connection between us, disappearing without warning is a boundary violation. But it doesn't look like
Yeah.
it because we think of boundary violations as only going towards.
One way.
But actually moving away is like a negative boundary violation. It's the removal of something.
Yeah.
So it's a form of wall. It's a form of blocking intimacy. A healthy boundaries create connection, even in the no.
Yes. Yes, they do.
So healthy boundaries are the edge of us. When we're in healthy boundaries, a healthy boundary is what maintains our sovereignty. It's what creates me
And
as a sovereign being.
yeah, and probably the wall situation is created by someone who does not have good
That's right.
boundaries.
That's right.
So therefore they have to erect a
They're
wall.
a replacement. They're a replacement for a lack of
Yes.
boundaries and a lack of true sovereignty. And then another thing I wanted to say is you were saying like talking about the anxious as an intense, like they're an intensely reactive being. something we have to recognize is avoidant behavior is also intensely reactive, but
Yes.
it's just numb. It's numb to intensity, but that is a form of intensity. It's an intense absence of intensity.
Yeah.
So there's a negative, there's a void associated with it. And that is
Mm.
something that sneaks by, and that is what allows more avoidant people to feel really justified and righteous in their behavior. I'm not feeling anything, so it's your problem. No, the fact that you're not feeling anything is a sign that something's wrong too.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not feeling anything, so, and me leaving, like, they're just being too needy, I'm out. You know, I'm not feeling anything, I'm out. That's actually
Yes.
pointing to something.
And for me, what I can speak to that is the reason why I disassociate from other people's needs that in that way, or their emotions in that way, is because as a child I always felt hyper responsible for my mother's emotions.
Yep.
So I had to disassociate from that in order to become my own self, right? My own,
Right.
like, to kind of restore some sense of rightful
Yeah.
childhood or something.
There's like the only way I can be sovereign is by keeping everyone away from me.
Well, by not becoming a little bit uncaring about the fact that you're upset, because I
Yeah.
can't be always responsible for the fact that you're upset.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Especially as a child. So then that carries
That's valid.
adulthood, where you're like, you know, the person's upset, but there's also a little bit of annoyance in you of, why are you burdening me with your emotions?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
That sounds
absolutely.
cold, but that's me being just real about why the dynamic even exists. It's not from a
Yeah.
place of like not being heartless. It's like
Yeah.
this sense of like, I don't burden you with my emotions. Why are you burdening me with all your stuff? And like, I can't handle it, you know?
Yeah. And whereas on the anxious side, we're like, please give us more of your emotions. Like, I want to feel you.
Yes.
I
You might
actually want to feel you.
then. You might get a
Huh?
whole lifetime of unfelt emotions if you're lucky.
Well, that's going to be part of the process, and that's what the gift actually offers here. Because on the anxious side, we can take all of that. You don't worry about that. You know,
Oh, you love
and
it. You
yeah, and
just be like holding all those emotions, just getting
that's right.
like excited.
And then, but then, so what happens? I know we're like, but what happens in this anxious avoidant dynamic is because of the absence of emotions on the avoidant side, the anxious person then just fills that space with all their own stuff. And then the avoidant feels righteous in saying, you're taking up too much space. And I'm like, what? I'm taking up too much space because you're not taking up any. So
You're describing this weird. For me, I think I could have a little bit of both. Maybe do I?
we all do. We all do.
Okay, I think I
We
might
all do.
be mainly avoidant, but once you give me a bit of room to get emotional, it's
Yep.
happening. It's coming
Yep.
to me.
Yep. But then, so
So
then we
I'm
want to,
conscious about that now, because dumping emotions all the time is not, that's not a good dynamic, and that's something that we have to recognize too. But if you're
yep.
not conscious, like, and especially a lot of you know, you do see a lot of people speaking about really intimate relationships where it's like emotions, emotions, emotions all day long, and
Mm.
you know, it's not good to.
Yeah, that's not necessarily healthy either. We don't want to be
Exactly.
like, especially we don't want to be constantly in our negative emotional state all the time. That's not moving towards security either. We just want to
No.
learn to be vulnerable. And vulnerability is not, I'm scared, I'm sad, I'm hurt. Vulnerability is also, I'm really happy today. Vulnerability is, I'm super proud of myself. Vulnerability is, I'm really attracted to you right now. Vulnerability is, I want to take you on a holiday. Vulnerability is anything that's connected to the intensity of, of our truth, really.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that's then the last kind of point that I want to leave with is that what you are starting to own there is that one part of this, moving towards breaking the hold of this pattern and moving towards the possibility of a secure relationship and the possibility of this like polarity based on an entirely different dynamic, a higher order polarity, this dominant submission, devotion, surrender, this kind of like really deep masculine feminine polarity that's like, oh, actually that's the thing that I really want, becomes possible when we move through our counterintuitive behaviors, which we touched on, but we also need to take responsibility for the behaviors and places where we're acting out of insecurity. We need to own them and speak them and own up and confess. Like, I would love to see more confessions happening on Facebook, people going, this is a way that I act that's avoidant. This is a way that I act that I'm anxious. Own it, share it, you know? And in the doing so of it, what we're doing is we're creating a differentiation in ourselves. We're taking, not in a shaming way. We don't need to shame ourselves for it. We need to learn how to do it with levity and humor and this sense of like, oh my God, I do this pattern. What it happens is it takes something that's my subjective experience, which is the pattern that I'm in. I'm unconsciously in this pattern. As I start to get a hold of it and awareness of it, and I start to own it and I share it outwards, it starts to become an object. It no longer is me, it's something that I see as me. And the more that that process happens, the more volition I have around how I engage with that pattern.
Yeah.
And so I can now see it. At first I'll start owning it and then I'll be like in it and then I'll go, oh, I'm doing that thing again. And then soon I'll start doing it and I go, oh, it's that thing. And I'll stop. And then soon enough, I'll see someone, I'll notice someone at a party and I'm like, oh, there's my attachment. And I won't even have to go up to them. You know, I'll go, oh, there's that thing, you know, before it even happens. Another point is we can actually work together as avoidant and anxious. We can work together. We can actually help each other heal, but we have to be, if you want to be in that relationship, you have to be with someone who's willing to do it. You can't coerce them to do it. You're breaking up with them may be the reason they end up healing, unfortunately. But if they're not interested in doing that with you while you're with them, you don't have much of a chance, you know, of truly doing it. So you have to choose people who are aware, you know. I now, when I go on a date, I ask someone, what is their attachment pattern? Do they know about it? Amongst other things. It's like, I want to know, do you know about how you are in relationship and are you working on it? Because otherwise I'm not going to be safe to like do my growth in this relationship.
Yeah.
So, and then that owning, that being willing to share the patterns and have a laugh is healing to the other. When I noticed it for the first time, there was someone, a particular woman on Facebook who's been sharing kind of her avoidance stories. And every time I read them, it was like a balm to my heart. It was healing to read that. It was like, oh, thank you. You know, I'm healed by your admittance, and vice versa. You know, when I can admit that I do this needy, clingy thing, avoidant people go, oh, thank you for taking responsibility.
Yeah. Yes. Because there's nothing worse than when, you know, if you're someone like you or I who's really into this stuff and blah, blah, blah. And then you might say to someone, you know, I'm doing this thing, but you're doing it too. And they're like, no, I'm not.
No, I'm not.
I'm not anxious. I don't feel anxious. It's like,
yeah, I'm secure. What are you talking about? The amount of people who tell me they're secure and then they tell me about how their relationships have been, and I'm like, you're not secure. You know, so many people think, they'll go online and they'll do a secure test, an attachment test, and come up with secure. And I'm like, well, are you in a romantic relationship at the moment of taking that test? Are you in the throes of intensity of a romantic? Then you're not. It's not a valid test unless you can do the test. If you want to do a secure attachment test to find your attachment pattern, you need to remember the last time you were in an intense relationship and answer from that place. Because it's really easy to think you're secure while you're single. Super easy.
Yeah, and I actually thought for years I was secure, and I think
avoidants often do.
Yeah, I did think I was secure for years, and then it was only quite recently that I thought that I saw that I was more avoidant, and that, like, it was you that had said about, you know, take the test from the perspective of like when you're in the stress moment of the situation, right? And I purposely took a test. I hadn't taken a test in years, but I purposely found an online test and I did it in the midst of like a real, like, emotionally stressful, like, because I'm moving countries right now, like a really, really stressful moment. And everything was coming to a head in my life. And when things are like that, I don't want to be in touch with anyone. you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so I came up highly avoidant in that test. But having said that, when things settle down, I will be in touch with people and everything like that. It's not like, you know, but,
Yeah.
but
So our
definitely,
attachment pattern is a relationship to stress. It's how
yeah,
we relate to stress, particularly interpersonal stress. And as we become more secure, and that's going back to what I said, when we're in stress, our frontal cortex goes offline and we go into survival patterns. That's what insecure attachment is. They're survival patterns.
yeah,
But as we become secure, we learn how to stay regulated even in stress. And we're able to access our creativity and
yeah,
our social engagement, you know, while in stress. And then we're also able to not move towards intensely stressful experiences, being one of
yes.
which is going after that highly intense chemistry relationship. That's a highly stressful situation. And if I'm not grounded in my ability to tolerate stress, it's going to take me out.
Yeah. And I think as well, there's that thing as well, like you said, your pattern, like you feel stressed, and like, let's say your pattern, if you're anxious, would be to reach out and seek reassurance from the other person, right? And kind of get a little bit of that clingy,
And when I'm really anxious, it's only that person, that
only that
one
person.
person. No one else can comfort
No
me.
one else will do.
No one else will do.
For me, it's like I would feel that sense of like, oh, I'm going to pull away now or whatever. But what I've noticed is that when I consciously changed that and started going, no, I'm going to seek to let my partner know. I'm going to tell him
Counterintuitive behavior.
and this is what I and explain a little bit. And it helped me to explain to him about the attachment patterns, because I could kind of use that language a little bit, and it was helpful for him to understand. But what I start to feel then is that, like, he'd be like, okay, so I can give you space now. And I'd be like, well, I actually don't really need it now, because whatever was triggering me, we've talked about it now and it's kind of gone. So that happens too, where you start to actually like come back into like homeostasis, or like, that kind of
Beautiful.
in through a new way, which is that you just shared with that person what was going on for you.
And what I hear in there is that recognition that the moving away, the needing space, is the response to stress. And so sharing suddenly, and normally you're used to resolving that stress by going away and being on your own, but in this moment you're sharing, and that's resolving the stress, and you're like, oh, I'm no longer stressed. I don't longer need to go away.
I don't really need to run away and have space now, because I feel
there's no stress.
Yeah, I feel fine again.
Yeah,
that's really interesting. But
that's beautiful.
Anxious person, it's good that they get used to having other people that they.
So an anxious person needs to. So this is what's been happening for me, is that I have some really amazing friendships that are secure, that are there for me no matter what. And even when I couldn't be reassured by them, they were still there, and they were still there, and they're still there, and they're still there. So now I notice when I'm stressed, I'm either in a broader connection of people, or I'm drawing on the memory of the fact that they're there. Not even needing to reach out to them, just the realization that they are there and they will always be there if I need them, calms me down. So this is what you get as a secure child. You have that map of your parent being there for you, so you don't have to do it anymore. So we have to create a new map, and that map is, oh, this person is there. Ideally, that's our romantic partner that we can draw on. I can remember that my romantic partner is always there for me, and that'll calm me down no matter what. But unfortunately, if we're insecurely attached, probably I'm attracted to an avoidant person and they're not there for me. The truth is that they're not there for me.
It's so funny how this all just lines up perfectly. It's like puzzle pieces of a really strange puzzle. I'm going to see, is there any
appropriate? Yeah, sure.
Well, we had some comments there, but we don't seem to have any questions. I think nothing. You need to get to know me. I'm very busy. Is there really a relationship here, love? And Alyssa says, she's interested in that change of control as well. A lot of women have that move now towards wanting to give up kind of this dominance and control, because, well, actually it's common in a lot of people who have a lot of high power positions in their lives, actually do seek to like a relief from that in their private life. It kind of makes total sense. So yeah,
The little pointer on that is that initially you're probably not going to find someone who does that straight away unless you win the lottery. And the people who can do that are probably going to be severely avoidant men for the
yeah,
most part. And then it's going to look like that, but they're actually not going to fully meet
you're
that.
not going to be healthy
So,
for you
so you're having to create that polarity with somebody. It's a
with
practice.
somebody safe. I
With
agree.
somebody safe, it's a practice. We're practicing this. We're practicing secure attachment. Until we're secure, we're practicing. So our partners are our practice buddies, you know, and
Yes.
until we're secure, the dom sub relationship, the higher order polarity is not available. And as it becomes available, we're practicing it, and we're going to make mistakes, and we're going to fuck up, and it's not
Yeah.
going to be perfect. And if we're looking for the perfect one who's got it all together already, the question is, do you have it all together? Are you a perfectly submissive woman right now? If so, probably any man's going to be able to meet you there. You know, you're going to be able to inspire any man into that, you know, or most men
Yeah.
into that. And same is, am I the perfectly dominant man? If not, you know, if I am, then probably any woman is just going to naturally polarize to me.
Yeah. And I think the deal with that is it's a very good point to make, is that, you know, this this dom sub dynamic that we're talking about is like both parties have chosen that. So, like, and like you say, considering
Consensual.
consensual, and considering the way culture has gone, it probably is more likely that it will be female led. So, like, it probably is more likely that it will be the woman coming to her man saying, actually, I want to incorporate this dynamic now.
Maybe, maybe. I suggest that there are lots of men out there who want this, but they're, like myself, easily overlooked because we're usually on the anxious side, and anxious men will get overlooked, but we're the ones most willing to do the work because it's not fucking working for us. Avoidant men, it works for
Yeah.
them. Avoidant men, it's easy for them to get sex and easy for them to get relationships because they don't care, you know?
Yeah. It's easy to
Anxious men,
avoid a woman as well.
exactly, because you don't care. And then so
Avoidant
everyone
woman, I
throws
think, is
themselves
the
at you.
easiest person to find love because, like, it's so rare. It's usually the woman is the anxious one, and for men, it's like this creates this kind of
I rarely meet anxious women, so I have no map of
really well. That would be
that.
natural for you, but I feel like for a lot of men, it creates this kind of interest level when the woman is not chasing them or anxious with them.
Mhm.
What in my experience, I have found that to be true. That, like, they're more interested in me because I'm just like, okay, whatever. But it's not
Mm.
intentional that I'm like whatever, but because I'm not rushing forward. But
Mm.
but yeah, and just to loop back to that, I think there's especially younger age groups as well. Like, men are not inclined to be super dominant, and they need to be probably
Culture. Well, we also have
invited into
layer
that.
into that the feminist movement that has
Of
emasculated
course,
men, you know, so men
yeah,
are very disconnected from that. And the only, that's why I'm saying most men who are actually naturally dominant are probably very avoidant too. And so that's
yeah,
why I'm saying, like, the people, you say it's female led, but I would say like you'll find male playmates who want to do that kind of work in places that you probably don't normally look.
yeah. And I agree with you because I actually think that, like, if you desire that and your partner is not presenting as very dominant naturally, I wouldn't say that's a reason to go, oh, I'm going to go and look for someone who's more naturally dominant, because that naturally dominant guy could be, like, really not a good choice for you. But if you have safety with someone who's not as dominant, you
We
can
can develop it.
well, you can work on that with someone who understands those dynamics and stuff like that, and you can actually, you can work on creating that dynamic. And it's probably going to work better because you're coming from a place of safety in the first place.
Mm. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we'll leave it there.
Absolutely.
Right?
Sure. Sounds good.
Okay. Thank you, Damien. That was
You're
amazing.
welcome.
Super good. So if people want to reach you, it's on your personal page, right? Damien Bowler, or Evolutionary Relating.
So my website is now live, but it's still very bare bones. It's evolutionaryrelating.org, O-R-G. So
Awesome.
there's not a lot on there, but it's going to be continuously added to over the next weeks. So there's courses that I run on there. There'll be essays, more essays that I'm writing. I wrote this article that was part 1. I have to write more to that. So I'm writing a series of essays on this topic that we're talking about.
Okay.
I'm also recording podcasts that'll be up on there too. So a lot of stuff.
Awesome. Amazing. Well, we'll keep an eye out for all of that stuff. Always like to see your shares. So thanks for joining me today. It was really enlightening.
Thanks, Alba. It was fun.
Talk soon.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.